This is eNews at 7 p.m. live from Johannesburg this evening. I'm Gareth Edwards. Good to be with you. Our top story, a state funeral for the Minister of Environmental Affairs, Edna Molewa, and also an emotional farewell to Westbury mother, Heather Peterson. PRASA has asked for more time to investigate the cause of the latest train collision. This as the railway safety regulator warns that it will revoke its safety permit. A great leader who sacrificed everything to secure South Africa's liberation. That's how the late Environmental Affairs Minister Edna Molewa has been hailed as she was laid to rest in Pretoria today. The 61-year-old passed away in hospital after a short illness late last month. Masego Ratlaga attended that funeral.
Military officials say they were honoured to accompany Edna Molewa to her final resting place. When this moment arrives, her children can no longer hide their pain. One of them shares how hard it will be that she won't be around to witness the birth of a grandchild.
I am expecting my first child next week. Her name will be Onalina. Onalina would love to meet her grandmother, and I know you are looking forward to meeting her too. I'm going to look at her every day and she'll remind me of you. I'll teach her everything you taught me and tell her about her powerhouse of a grandmother.
Then it's time for Molewa's mother, Nana Meti, to bid her final goodbye. Meti softly tells her daughter to rest well, that she's done her part. She was comforted by President Cyril Ramaphosa, who earlier delivered the eulogy.
She is one of those who should one day be considered for a Nobel Prize for saving the rhino, because her work has done a lot to save the rhino for future generations. It is testament to her hard work that the environmental programs of the expanded Public Works Program, the EPWP, continue to be amongst the most successful, not only in South Africa, but in the world. People from across the world come to South Africa to come and learn how we are doing our public works programs.
Ramaphosa was joined by his deputy David Mabuza, as well as former presidents Thabo Mbeki, Kgalema Motlanthe and Jacob Zuma, among many other dignitaries. There were also moments of lightness as some family members remembered her with laughter.
Lastly, as I conclude, I don't mean to go against anybody's religious beliefs or practices, but I hope you find comfort in the fact that we'll see her again someday, that her tragic passing is not the end of the road. And here I am representing my grandmother, not crying, because I know for a fact she wouldn't have wanted me to cry. If I cried, yo, wait. Hey, you know? So I'd like to thank you all, truly. I'd like to thank you all for coming. I mean, it was crazy walking in here finding Cyril. Like, yo.
Molewa leaves behind her mother, 6 siblings, 4 children and 3 grandchildren. Masego Ratlaga, Pretoria.
Heather Peterson, who was shot and killed during a shootout in Westbury 2 weeks ago, was also buried today. Her death led to week-long protests against gangsterism and crime in that area. The 45-year-old's family and friends bid their final goodbyes in an emotional ceremony. Slindilo Masakane was there.
Heather Peterson's coffin carried down the street where she lived and raised her 6 children. 2 weeks ago, her body was found slumped in a passage meters from her home. Her death came as a great shock to the people who loved and respected their Auntie Heather.
We want to say thank you, Heather. You died so that we can be freed one day.
The youngest Peterson child is 4 years old. Husband Ruben says his family has lost their epicenter.
My wife Heather wasn't a live person. She may be lying in a coffin today, but she was an alive person. She was a people's person. She was a person that always had a smile on her face. Very strict at home, a no-nonsense mom, but a loving mom.
Peterson's death led to days of clashes with police as residents demanded action in safeguarding them. Police Minister Begicele has now deployed the Amaberete to clamp down on lawlessness and drugs. An investigation into the Sophiatown police station is also underway. Action taken won't bring this mother and friend back. But as they weep, her family says they also know that her life mattered. Heather Peterson mattered. Slindalo Masigan, Westbury in Johannesburg.
The Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa has confirmed that it is set to lose its safety permit. The rail safety regulator has delivered a warning letter. This was yesterday. It was giving PRASA 2 hours to give reasons why that permit should not be revoked. This comes after the collision of 2 trains on Thursday near Van Riebeek Station in Kempton Park. PRASA says it's still investigating the accident, which happened 2 days ago, and has asked the regulator to reconsider its deadline. It also says manual authorization in train operations takes place because of cable theft and other criminal activity that does often affect signalling equipment. Well, the Energy Department's Independent Power Producer Programme is upsetting unions. Dozens of workers have marched to Parliament demanding that government address their concerns. Leanne Jansen was there.
Just more than 100 members of the SACP, the NUM and COSATU have joined forces for a march to Parliament. Their grievances, power purchase agreements and independent power producers signed off for Eskom. The unions say the agreements will have dire implications not only for workers but also for ordinary South Africans.
The reason for our displeasure with the Department of Energy is the signing of power purchase agreements and forcing them at Eskom at a time when Eskom cannot afford to even pay its debt at a price that cannot be justified. A unit of electricity being purchased by Eskom from the IPPs in excess of R2.16, while Eskom sells the very same electricity to the consumers at an average of about 85 cents. This is plummeting Eskom into a deeper financial crisis by the Department of Energy, and it's a self-inflicted financial loss to benefit the private and the few individuals that are owning the IPPs.
They say the action will only intensify if government does not heed the call of South Africans.
Struggles like this cannot be resolved and answered at a fingertip. We understand the hurdle that is ahead of us, and we are prepared. We are prepared to continue, because if we stop or surrender, we'll have no Eskom tomorrow, and we'll have no country tomorrow. A country whose debt is close to or above 50% of its GDP. Eskom, whose debt is rising and is struggling to pay, cannot be allowed to continue signing more PPAs. And moreover, the IRP draft that is there must be revised. It's very unrealistic, and in fact, it must be put on ice, and the subjective views on whoever is advising the Minister of Energy must be crushed and be discouraged.
Leanne Jansen, Parliament.
The Economic Freedom Fighters has held its provincial elective conference in Pietermaritzburg, KwaZulu-Natal. The party says it is encouraged by the growing numbers of its members in KZN. Party spokesperson Mbuyiseni Ndlozi says they plan to capture even more votes there in the 2019 general elections.
KwaZulu-Natal EFF has launched over 90% of branches across the province, in all the wards of the province. So for each and every region to go into a regional People's Assembly, which is a regional elective meeting, elect its leadership, it must have first launched 90% of the branches. That means we've got at least 100 paid up members in each and every ward of the 90% of the wards of KwaZulu-Natal. And that's a proper base. That's a proper collective of activists. And that was not the case in 2014. It is the case as we go into 2019. That's growth.
Coming up after the break, Zimbabweans queue for hours due to a shortage of fuel as the country continues to battle with an economic crisis. Welcome back to eNews at 7 p.m. I'm Gareth Edwards. Fuel shortages, sharp price hikes and a shortage of foreign currency, all signs that Zimbabwe is now in an economic crisis. Ordinary Zimbabweans, economists and even some politicians are warning of unrest, blaming the crisis on the finance ministry and also the central bank.
Long queues snake from most petrol stations in Harare as Zimbabwean motorists struggle to find the precious liquid. The very few stations that still have fuel have hiked the pump price by 10%.
The ED fare, we thought it was going to bring a change in the country, but it's like we are going back to Mugabe era, which is really pathetic and which is not good for us, for the country as well.
Reserve Bank Governor John Mangudya and the new Finance Minister Mthuli Ncube recently announced fiscal and monetary measures. But main opposition leader Nelson Chamisa and economist John Robertson says they are a mess that will increase the cost of business and possibly lead to labor unrest as workers demand higher wages to cushion themselves against the rising cost of living.
There is no way we are going to allow the kind of nonsense that is taking place to go on unchecked and also uncontested. We are seeing that an anti-people government is coming up with anti-people policies, which policies are meant to hurt the ordinary people, and we will not accept that.
An additional tax of this magnitude would actually destroy our consumption, destroy our purchasing power as a nation.
But the Deputy Minister for War Veterans, Victor Matemadanda, pleaded with the Zimbabweans to give President Emerson Mnangagwa time to fix the economy.
When one is appointed to lead a critical ministry like finance, he will do not take decisions that will go against the reason and purpose of appointment. So I think the underlying is good, but it is not understood.
The Finance Ministry announced a raft of measures that will allow bank depositors to hold separate accounts for the United States dollars and Zimbabwe bond notes for the first time since 2009. The government introduced the surrogate currency bond notes in 2016 after shortages of dollars. Pindai Dube, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Let's bring you news from even further afield now. The ongoing conflict on the Gaza-Israel border is stirring up friction beyond Palestinian protesters and Israeli forces. Now we have right-wing Israelis that have begun attacking left-wingers, while pro- and anti-Palestine activists are also at odds. At least 180 Palestinians have died during protests against Jerusalem's blockade of the Gaza Strip in the past 5 months. And that standoff continues to escalate. After the break, we'll have your weather details, and then South African artists make a splash at a contemporary African art fair in London.
Hello again, everyone. It was a sunny Saturday for most of South Africa, and we are expecting more sunny and dry weather for Sunday. But at first, it will be quite cloudy for parts of the south coast and the adjacent interior. But that cloud will start thinning out as the day goes on. Later on, it will be partly cloudy for the central and western parts. Very hot weather expected for parts of the Cape provinces, and it will be a clear day up in the northern parts for Gauteng as well as Limpopo. The Northern Cape will see some areas climbing into the mid to upper 30s in the afternoon, including Uppington and Prieska, but some fog along the coastline keeps things cooler for that area. Alexander Bay only likely to reach 21 degrees. A high of 42 is expected for Vredendal in the afternoon. Very hot for Langebaan and Cape Town as well at 33 degrees, but towards the south coast it will be much cooler along with some of that cloud. Cloud will also extend along the eastern Cape coastline, where it will become quite windy later on, although the province does stay dry. And we expect similar conditions for KwaZulu-Natal, with Durban reaching a maximum of 24 degrees, where it will be partly cloudy, but Ladysmith 30 degrees Celsius as your maximum temperature. Overnight temperatures will be dropping below the 10-degree mark on the Mpumalanga Highveld, but it will be another warmer afternoon in the area on Sunday. Hot conditions, on the other hand, for most of Limpopo, Musina in the far north, reaching a maximum of 32 degrees. Sunny and hot weather expected for your Sunday in the northwest. 32 is a high for Mahikeng, and it will be another warm day over the Free State, but very chilly in the morning for Bethlehem and Zastron, both dropping down to an overnight low of 6. And finally, for Gauteng, near perfect weather conditions expected for your Sunday. It's going to be clear and calm, as well as very warm over the area. Taking a look ahead to Monday, we're going to see dry weather conditions persisting over South Africa, although partly cloudy skies are expected for the western parts. It is going to be a very hot day. Cape Town expected to reach 37 degrees, but that cools down on Tuesday, 24 for the mother city. A very hot day in the northern parts of the country. Johannesburg gets to 29, and it's going to be sunny for KZN as well as the Eastern Cape, where Port Elizabeth gets to 31.
Thank you, Louis. Now, finally, appreciation for South African art around the world is very much on the rise, and experts believe that's because of the country's well-established arts infrastructure. It's well placed to benefit significantly from the interest being generated. Here's our UK correspondent, Natalie Powell.
The first major UK solo exhibit for artist Artie Patruga has just opened in London. The artist uses an explosion of colour to create mythical worlds which challenge cultural identity. Ruga's art also uses alternate realities to critique post-apartheid South Africa and question the notion of a rainbow nation. And he says the response from the UK to his work has been overwhelmingly positive.
The British audience somehow feels it, because also the British audience is multicultural. I think that most people I spoke to yesterday had accents, and for me, I'm really fascinated by that. And I think that they do get the themes of movement, whether it's forced movement, whether it's voluntary movement, leaving home for better opportunities.
The interest in South African art from abroad is so significant that this sculpture by Western Cape artist Emma Willemse greets many visitors as they walk into this arts fair in London. And many people here believe that South Africa is the arts capital of the African continent. That's largely as a result of more established arts infrastructure. 154 is a leading arts fair dedicated to contemporary African art. Its founder explains why worldwide recognition of South African art has come a long way over recent years.
You have things in South Africa that you have nowhere else in terms of infrastructure on the continent. So I think it's quite an amazing thing for an artist from South Africa today to know that they have strong institutions that they can belong to.
Even in difficult economic times for South Africa, the arts infrastructure already in place is helping stimulate a strong arts market. And with global recognition on the rise, the country's arts scene seems to be going from strength to strength. Natalie Powell, London.
Well, here's a recap now of your main stories this evening. A state funeral for Minister of Environmental Affairs Edna Molewa, and also an emotional farewell to Westbury mother Heather Peterson taking place today. My thanks to the team behind the scenes. From me for this evening, it's good night. Bye-bye.